Welcome to the Mind Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Kourtakis, and I am a licensed therapist, life coach, and wellness consultant who works with high-achieving individuals and power couples. And today I have Ray on board. Welcome, Ray.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Hey, really appreciate you coming out today. Ray and I are going to have a little conversation about men's mental health. We're going to talk about a few different standpoints and a little bit about what Ray's experienced with working with me and also just mental health for men in general. So, Ray, if you don't mind, we'll just get right into it.
Go ahead.
All right. Ray, what was your tipping point for the moment you realized that you didn't have to carry your burden alone and you said, I want to talk to someone?
Well, for a long time, I thought that it was just an issue I could handle. And I just found out that mentally, I just couldn't set it down. And it just became overwhelming. And it got to the point where these thoughts were just a bit overwhelming and they were taxing and they were exhausting. And at that point, I knew I felt like I had to talk to somebody.
Making that phone call, what did that feel like? What did that, I hate to use the word feel, but I mean, as the men, sometimes it's the hardest phone call to make.
I didn't like it. It felt like I was mentally weak and I didn't want to ask for help. I'm not comfortable asking for help. I like trying to solve things on my own. So to me, it felt like almost like a sign of weakness, I guess.
No, that makes perfect sense because as men wanting to fix everything on our own, and we hate when we have to ask for directions or actually use the instructions.
100%. Yep, so, that was me. Yep.
When you finally made that call, did you have any hesitations or fears about what counseling was going to be like before your first session?
I was incredibly apprehensive and nervous because I figured if I couldn't solve the problem, how could somebody else? Because I knew the problem better than anybody. So to me, it just felt like, well, I'm at this point where I need to try something because clearly I don't have the answer and I need to kind of be pushed in a direction to figure it out.
No, that makes perfect sense. And like I said, as men, we want to figure everything else and to ask for directions or to ask for using the instructions is probably the worst thing that we would have to do. So give you credit for doing what you did and getting over those fears. When you were walking in to your first session versus how you felt walking out of your first session, can you describe that a little bit?
I think a lot of times, at least speaking for me, I tend to think things are going, I tend to, you've used the phrase, find the rotten egg, where I tend to think that things are going to be much worse than they actually are because maybe I plan ahead for worst case scenario instead of just thinking, okay, let's just experience this in real time and see where it goes. So I was relieved that it went as well as it did for me.
That's great. So talking about that it went really well, the actual experience of counseling differed from what you really expected it to be.
100%. It's nothing that I imagined. It's very conversational. I basically led the discussion. I was given things to consider that in hindsight, they seem so incredibly obvious, like forest through the trees kind of deal. But because I was so caught up in trying to fix it my way, it never occurred to me that there would be another way. And that's what I think was incredibly frustrating for me because when I left, I was like, oh, I'm given these tools now that I can use that they were there all along. I just never considered it because my mind was on a whole different path.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point. It's the forest and the trees is the hardest thing. And, and when somebody comes into counseling to see me or what you're through your experience is exactly just that. We sometimes need somebody just to help us take a step back and look at the whole big picture, trying to go after the whole thing.
I still feel that way. We still have sessions and you constantly will point something out to me that when you say it, like the light goes off and I get simultaneously excited that this option's available. And then I also get a little bit disappointed that it never occurred to me. But I think that's because I've trained my brain to some point to think that there's only one way to do things. And I'm occasionally putting square pegs into round holes. And then when you give me another option, it definitely makes my life easier.
Yeah. And I mean, as humans, we want to accomplish and we kind of have blinders on sometimes. And to be able to see the whole spectrum of options, it's like using one screwdriver for that screw when we have 20 in the toolbox.
I am certainly guilty of that. Yes. And you've presented me a plethora of options, which makes my life infinitely easier.
So what would you say to somebody listening right now that's struggling with something like you went through and but was afraid to take the first step?
Well, what I would say is if you feel like you're stuck in a problem and you're in like a circle or a rut, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And I think you might find yourself pleasantly surprised, at the very least, to be able to discuss the problem with somebody and be given a perspective that you weren't aware of. Sometimes you can't fix a problem if, like, you don't have the tools, like Chris says. And it's nice to be able to explore other options. And it takes just such a burden off you. It feels like there's a weight off your shoulder when you figure something out. It's really like an aha moment, and it's incredibly gratifying. And I would hope that it's worth, I don't want to say embarrassment, because I guess my apprehension about seeing counseling or therapy was that I felt like I was weak because I couldn't figure something out. But I think everybody has issues that they can't figure out. And to be able to find an answer to something that will make you feel better, it is well worth your time to at least explore that as an option.
No, and you bring up a great point, Ray, about weakness. And it's funny when it comes to mental health, because if we have high blood pressure, we can't figure it out ourselves. We go to a doctor and he prescribes medication. When we have an issue with a broken bone, we go to a doctor and he fixes it because it's something that we can't fix. But when it comes to mental health, it seems like that stigma of I should be able to fix this myself, or I should be able to solve this problem myself. And as men, or just high achieving individuals as a general, we're so used to solving the issues and working and going to work every day. It's hard for some of us to ask the questions, but when we're surrounded by smarter people, we're able to exceed and excel. And you and I talk about out of the comfort zone all the time. And the only way we're going to learn or grow is outside of that comfort zone. But it's been challenging ourselves to ask, how do I get outside that comfort zone? Or how do I get where I'm uncomfortable? And as men, we struggle with that because, like you said, we're used to solving problems ourselves. And it's almost like, am I a failure because I can't figure this out myself?
Well, I know there are times that I've walked out of our session and I have felt uncomfortable. And you have pointed out to me that that means that I'm doing the work, and making change isn't easy. We get set in patterns and we do what's comfortable. Sometimes you have to embrace the uncomfortable to move forward. And that's hard to do, but ultimately it's what you need to do. And if you don't have that option available to you, you're still going to be stuck in the same rut wondering, what can I do? And yeah, you have pointed out before about, to me, but yeah, you can't diagnose something. Like if you have a broken finger, you go to the doctor and say that, but your brain is a muscle. And when it's going 1,000 miles an hour and you can't slow it down, and you keep having these same thoughts about, why can't you figure this out? Why can't you figure this out? It just becomes exhausting. So I agree with you wholeheartedly about the concept of mental health. A lot of people have a negative stigmatism on it, but I was certainly guilty of that. But now I wholeheartedly embrace the importance of mental health. It is become a huge part of my life.
No, and that's fantastic. And the funny part is I just did a podcast on vulnerability, and I believe that vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And what I mean by that, Ray, is that the more you talk about you going to counseling and the more I talk about counseling, it gives people the confidence to ask questions or to say, hey, I need help. What was it like? Or that vulnerability that you put yourself out there gives other people that opportunity to say, hey, I'm not alone. Ray did it. I guess I can do it too. And we need to talk more about mental health. And yeah, we have a month of men's mental health and things like that, but we need to be talking about it 365 days a year, because our suicide rates for men are just through the roof. I mean, 500,000 and 1.2 every year attempt it, with 500,000 actually doing it. I mean, it's over 50% for men. And yes, there's men and women, but we're leading the way. And I would love to see that number get to zero for everybody. But we got to realize we're not alone. And I say it all the time that if I ask you who your cardiologist is, you can tell me. If I ask you who your ophthalmologist, you can tell me. But when I ask you who your mental coach is, everybody kind of looks at me with deer in the headlights. So it's something that we really need as a society to bring out to the norm. And the John Wayne ways of doing things are gone. And today's society needs to really embrace mental health and the stigmas that are behind it.
No, you make an amazing point about, if I got a great deal on a car, you'd say, hey, where did you get that car? And you would have no problem telling them. But if somebody says to you, man, how do you stay so positive? How do you feel so up all the time? And you say, well, I see somebody and I talk to somebody and they help me with things and I figure things out. I would want to share that with people who ask me, because it's an amazing feeling to wake up in the morning and feel good about yourself and feel positive and not be bogged down by life.
You bring up a great point. Again, it's sharing that positivity and wanting everybody to feel the same way that you do.
Yes. You share, if you have a good bottle of wine, or if you see a show that you like, you want to share that with somebody. Why wouldn't you want to share, like, hey, this experience has been really positive for me? You get to get things off your chest. You get to explore things and give options that make your life easier. Why wouldn't you want to do that for anybody?
No, and I mean, those are great examples with the bottle of wine and things like that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, people are, I don't want to say scared or nervous or don't know what to expect. And I think the movies haven't helped us. The notepad on the couch, just laying there talking about our feelings, is the stigma. And then when people come in, like you said, we sit there and we have a conversation. We talk about
Yes.
things. And we work through those problems together. And a lot of people think that it's just sitting there talking and venting where there is no real outcome, or they think they have to figure it out themselves because a counselor may or may not help them. So, which brings me up to my next point. Do you remember why you chose me as a counselor?
Why I chose you? I actually, where you used to work, I guess for me, it was just kind of happenstance. Where we met, it was predominantly women. And when I went in there, and I remember it was a process of filling out forms. I was told, we have a counselor that we send to men, and he's a man, and would you have a problem with that? And I was like, no, of course not. And so I guess I was paired up with you by complete happenstance. So it was my good fortune that you turned out to be my therapist.
No, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And a lot of people do seek out men, and men want to talk to men, but that doesn't mean that women can't help men process if they're willing to put their guard down and be a little bit more vulnerable. At the end of the day, it's just going to counseling and making sure that you're putting the work in. And I tell people all the time is, if you go in and the first counselor doesn't work, move on to the second one or the third one or the fourth one, because you may not find that great fit the very first time. And you and I just happen to click right away, and things have been working out very, very well for our therapeutic relationship. So I appreciate that. Thank you. When we first started working together, what did I do, or was the environment we did create that make you feel safe? Was there something special I did that helped you feel comfortable? Was it the environment? Was it our conversation of how it started? What made you truly feel that this was a safe space or an environment that you could truly grow in?
Well, I remember you telling me that when we sat down, like you said, everything we say is confidential. Unless you talk about hurting somebody else or hurting yourself, then I have to do something about it. That was never an issue for me. Then you just said, go ahead and talk. And that's what I did. First, I was a little bit apprehensive, but then the floodgates just opened up because you listened and you understood my perspective. And then you would say, well, have you considered this? And then I would think about it for a minute, and honestly, I'd be like, no, that had never occurred to me, because I was in the past, this way had always worked for me. And eventually it stopped working. And then when you gave me some information that, hey, there's other ways to accomplish this task. And because I've been doing something for so long, and it just becomes like muscle memory. And I think that's the hard part to change, when you get used to doing something that used to be successful for you and no longer is. You just keep going back to the well. And once the well's dry, you got to find a new well. And that's what you offered to me. And I remember leaving our first session, and it was a longer session. You said, our first session is going to go run long. And it did. And man, when I left there, I felt like I could run through a brick wall, because it was like I could blind and now I could see, because I just had so many different avenues to explore that I had honestly never considered. And the truth is, they were always there. I just didn't see them.
And you're absolutely right. They are always there. It's just a matter of trying to understand what is behind the blinders that we put on ourselves for daily lives every day. When you talk about our sessions, as the first one you walked out feeling like Superman, and and you came back in the second one, the third one, what actually kind of clicked and you said, okay, this guy actually gets it and I can trust him, and I want to come back and work through my process together with him?
Well, you had told me, and you said, I don't generally like to give homework, but you gave me a book that you wanted me to read. And that night I went home and I ordered it online, and I got it within a day or two. And I mean, I tore through it, gave me a lot of things to think about, but it also showed me that I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. And it's an easily correctable thing. And it's right here in writing. I'm not the only person that has had this issue. One of my biggest issues was always assuming instead of asking. I assume instead of ask. And the book, can I talk about the book that you told me to read?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's called The 4 Agreements. And there's 4 things that you have to agree with yourself. And when you acknowledge that these are all easily correctable, it's amazing. And one was about, you always assume. And that's what I was entirely guilty of. And when I saw that in print and looked at it, and then I reread it, it just blew my mind. And I think when I came back to you and you realized, okay, this is an individual that really wants to put in the work and really wants to get healthy, mentally I've never been afraid of working hard. So I think for us, it was just a good fit because I was there for a reason. And I think since we've been seeing each other, I feel great about our relationship and about how I'm feeling, but it's like going to the gym. Once you go to the gym, you just keep going because when you miss it, your brain's a muscle and you want to keep working it out and keep getting better. You can never not feel good enough. So to me, it's worth this relationship. It's worth putting in the work because ultimately even when I explore something that I hadn't considered and it does make me uncomfortable, it gives me pause to think about, okay, this might be uncomfortable, but it's like working out another body part. At first, it's going to be sore for a while because you're not used to using it. And then once you start working that part out of your brain or your body, it just becomes second nature and you don't think about it anymore. It's just there. You have it to use. So that's how I think of, I don't know if this is a long way of saying, but this is how I've dealt with our relationship. I'm always trying to get better, and by get better, I just mean feel better.
Right. And that's the whole point of coming to counseling, is so that you leave better than when you walked in. So you feel better and have the tools to help yourself move on through the week and through the month and through life. I mean, that's the whole thing that people don't understand about counseling. They think we're going to come in and we're going to talk about when you were 2 years old, and you sucked your thumb and how that's affecting you now. And that's not how my modality is. And I think you and I have hit on that. So with somebody who's never been in session with me, Ray, how would you describe my energy and my presence to them in session?
I think your strongest strength and your greatest attribute is your ability to listen. People generally you can hear, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're listening. There are times where I'll be talking and you'll say, hold on a second, Ray. I want to interrupt you here for a minute. You said this. And then you kind of will bring up a point and I'm like, oh, now I know we're on the same page because he's taken a moment to tell me, I know what you're saying, but have you considered this? Or, okay, that's a really good point. So I think to me, that's your greatest attribute is you're a good listener. But also, again, I don't mind putting in extra work to make myself feel better or at the very least learn. I kind of enjoy learning things, and knowledge is important to me, and having access to things that I hadn't considered. And you have no problem telling me, hey, here's something you should listen. Here's something you should watch. Here's something you could look into. And I enjoy that, So again, I'm interested in making myself better, and you give me that opportunity when I'm in session and when I'm out of it.
No, and you're right. I mean, my sessions are conversational, and if I told you in the very first time you met me, I call bullshit when there's bullshit. So there's no fluff, there's no buff. We're here to get to another point, and that's the point of the other side and things like that. So we talked a little bit about my counseling style being conversational, and yeah, I mean, it's funny because they say we're not supposed to interrupt the patient and let them have the conversation, but it's sometimes that there is a thought that pops in, and I want you to focus on it a little bit more because, like you said, you may not have realized it or realized the importance of it. So yeah, I do interrupt. Like I said, my style is different from others. We're looking forward. We're using what we call solution focus. We want you to look forward to having hope of getting to where you want to go versus processing what happened in the rearview mirror, in a sense. So yeah, it is very conversational, and we focus a lot on the practical steps of moving forward. And how has this approach landed with you compared to just rehashing things from the past? A lot of counselors, you come in and you say, okay, well, today we're going to talk about when you were 12. We don't do that in our sessions. When you come in, the first thing I say is what's been better. And then I say, all right, what do you want to talk about? Because it's your hour.
Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say, Chris. Two things. One, I never feel like I'm being interrupted. I'm feeling like we're having a dialogue. I mean, I know how I feel, and I'm there because I want your thoughts on this, or I want you to point me in a direction like, well, again, it's about giving me options and considering options. So I never feel like I'm interrupted. Two, I'm shocked how fast our time goes by. And I know there have been instances where you've been extremely kind with your time and letting me go over, and I appreciate that. And I'll say to you, oh, I wanted to mention this, I wanted to mention that. And you'll say, well, you can. This is your session. You talk about what you want. I feel like there are things I've read were imprinted as youths and as children, and how we react. And we picked up learned behavior. And if that's something that I want to discuss with you, it's not something we generally discuss, but I know that I'll be able to discuss it with you and we can have a conversation and you will share with me what you know if I ask you those questions. That's just not an avenue that we've necessarily explored, but it's always available to me if I choose to go that route.
It absolutely is. If that's something you said, all right, if you came in today and said, all right, I want to talk about something I've been thinking about when I was 12, we'll absolutely explore it. But it's not a set session. I'm not going to pull out a book and say, all right, Ray, last week we talked about
No,
this. Let's continue that conversation because
we've never done that.
as a counselor, you come in and you may want to talk about, XYZ. And for me to say, all right, today we're going to talk about ABC, you're not going to enjoy that therapeutic session. You're going to want to be able to process what's on your mind today. And that's part of my approach is we come in with a blank slate and what's been better? What are we going to talk about today? And we process and go through and have those conversations.
Well, just for me, what we tend to do when we work is I will pull out my phone because I make notes during the week about reminders. This is what I want to discuss with Chris, or this is something I noticed, or am I crazy? Is this right? Is this wrong? And you always say it's not right or wrong and you're not crazy. It's how you feel. So that's the one thing too. It's like, if you have something in your head that you feel like this is like a red flag, why am I the only one that thinks like this? You're not the only one that thinks like this. It's just you're kind of thinking different. A lot of people think that same way. You're just not used to thinking that way. I make notes about things that I want to talk to about you with Chris. Things that, like, when I say red flag, it's not necessarily a red flag. It's not a major life development. It's just something that I've noticed about myself, or I've noticed with an interaction, or I feel different about something than I used to feel. And a lot of times it's positive. It isn't necessarily negative, but I still want to discuss it with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's not everything is negative that we bring to counseling, and a lot of it is positive. You recall a time that it challenged a belief that you had and how you handled it and what it worked for you?
I tend to react instead of always necessarily taking proper measures, to just kind of take a moment and consider things. And I'm not saying that my reactions were necessarily wrong, but sometimes when you react and you don't think about things, you kind of later on, you'll be like, oh, I wish I would have handled it this way, or just take a beat, think about things, calm down. I'm trying to find calm in my life. That's my big thing, because work, children, marriage, health, family members, friends, there's a million things going on. And if you want to stay in touch or grounded with all of them, it's a ton of work and it can be exhausting. And sometimes you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and people will see that, and you're frantic, and you can't spend the time you want with somebody or do something with somebody because you're over here and you're just running yourself ragged. And now I just try to take a beat and say, okay, I can only do what I can do. I can't be perfect for everybody. I'm doing the best I can. And that's good enough. That doesn't make me a bad person because I can't give 110% to everybody. You showed me a video one time and it was amazing to me about pitcher and a glass of water. You pour some water into this glass. This is your job. You pour water into this glass. This is your marriage. You pour water into this glass. This is your children. And at the end, your glass isn't filled because you've poured water into everybody else's. And ultimately, those glasses always need more water, but there's not enough water. And when you get the water, you still pour it in those glasses. You don't leave anything for yourself. And it's okay to take time for yourself and do things for yourself. You're not hurting other people, because ultimately, if your glass is empty and you're not where you need to be, you can't help others the way you want to. So that was an amazing analogy that you used, and that sticks with me quite a bit. Save some water for yourself.
I appreciate that. And I'm glad that's something that I emphasize that has stuck in your head beyond our sessions.
Chris, if you think about it, I mean, ultimately, that's just common sense. You can't help others if you're not helping yourself. If you're not feeling right, if you're down or you're sick or you're mentally fatigued, how can you give to others what you want if you're not giving to yourself? And the way you explained it to me, it just like, it wasn't like you turned on a switch. It's like you hit me with a floodlight. It just made so much sense to me. I don't want to use the phrase as a man. As a man, you want to take care of others before you take care of yourself. And it just gets to the point where if you're not looking out for yourself, then you can't help others the way you want to.
You bring up a great point, Ray, because as men, our cups are empty most of the time because we are working 80 hours a week to put food on the table. And when we come home, wives want us to do certain things and the kids want our attention, and our parents, if we're in those sandwich years, need our assistance, and it's go, 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 go. And so when do we really truly take time for ourselves, or when do we put ourselves first? And you and I have talked about it in sessions that if we don't advocate for ourselves, nobody else is going to advocate for us, because that's just life. Everybody's going to take and take and take and take and take. And until we finally say, hey, you know what? I need time for myself, or I need to take a break, that if we don't do that, we are going to get burned out. We are going to run on E and continue to run on E. And the scary part is with people like you and I, is that we start to realize that running on E feels normal, and we normalize it. And it doesn't make it right, but it's just that becomes our new normal. And once you come to counseling and realize that it's not normal and there is other things that you can do, you start, like you said, start feeling better immediately once you start realizing, because we don't realize it as men, as high achievers, and women too. It's just we go, and this becomes the new norm of 7 days a week of sports and travel and job, and we don't take time for ourselves. We don't take the vacations because we don't have the time, or we don't take the Sundays. I always talk about Sundays back in the day when I grew up. You went to your grandmother's house and there was 75 people there, and the family had dinner, and that was it. If you weren't there, my grandmother would beat you with a wood spoon the next week because you missed. And that was just, we don't take that family time anymore. And I always tease, I say, when I become president, I'm going to put the 8th day in where nobody can work, no stores are open. We just have to stay home and spend time with our family, because we just don't do that. And we normalize running on E too much now.
Well, I know you said to not like bring up or if I wasn't comfortable talking about, my personal issues, but I mean, that was exactly one of the reasons that I started counseling. My life hadn't had a significant changing effect, like a life altering effect. Everything was always the same. I hadn't changed. Everything was still like running par for the course. It's just what I didn't realize is I was just mentally exhausted from not filling up my cup. And before I could work through it. But finally, it just, that was my snapping point, I guess, because I just couldn't anymore, because I was just literally, like I said, the muscles of brain, and my brain was not getting fed, or my personal time, or just, I was disappointed that I wasn't doing what I thought I needed to constantly do to help everybody else. And I was never necessarily looking at me, and I was overwhelmed. Life just became a lot of work.
Yes. And burnout is real, and we don't even realize that
burnout.
we're burned out. And we just, like you said, we just continue to go through life. And finally we hit that wall and say, I need help. And, and we need more men and more people, and just society in general, to say, hey, it's okay to raise your hand. So
yeah. And that was my thing, Chris. It's like there was no significant life change where it altered my brain or anything. It's just I was tired, and I didn't understand why I was feeling this way, because I'd been doing this my whole life. And it just finally, you keep pulling on a rubber band and it stretches and stretches and stretches. Well, my rubber band broke and I didn't know how to fix it. It's hard to fix a broken rubber band. You need a new rubber band.
It's a great analogy, and you're right. The rubber band gets stretched and stretched and stretched until it finally breaks, and when it does, then we don't know how to, Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, and we don't know how to put it back together again. When you think back to our sessions, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about the relationship between a counselor and a client, based on how we work together?
Well, I think media shows like you sitting behind a desk with a notebook, all astute, with your glasses on the tip of your nose, and you're just writing down notes. You don't take notes in our session. And I was shocked, and I was like, how do you remember all this? And you told me, because I take notes when you leave. I make memos when you leave. And I was like, oh, of course, there's another question that's really, really obvious. But I think you feel like, well, maybe not you feel like, but the general people feel like it's not a personal relationship. It's like a cold calculated, you're seeing a doctor. And I think if you find a therapist who works for you, it isn't that way at all. I've never felt uncomfortable. The setting that I'm in is generally relaxing. It's conversational. You don't talk about your id, your ego. You don't talk about Freud. You don't throw all these fancy terms out there that I think get associated with like mental health. And again, I think just the stigma of like, if somebody's speaking to somebody because you have a problem, people generally use the term crazy. I would not say I'm crazy at all. I'm trying to better myself. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Everybody has problems. Whether you want to discuss them or handle them on your own, that's your prerogative. But I'm here to tell you that if you have a problem that you feel like you can no longer handle by yourself, then by all means, take the avenue that I've explored because it's really helped. I can't guarantee success for everybody. You have to put in the work if you want to achieve something, but at the very least, you'll get to discuss it. And I promise you, just saying it out loud to somebody will make you feel 1,000% better.
You brought up the main point of therapy is you have to put the work in. The therapist is going to meet you where you're at. And I'm going to meet every one of my clients where they're at. If they're at high energy, I'm high energy. If you need to bring it down a little bit, I will bring it down. But the reason people say that they're successful with me is because I meet them where they're at, but they're willing to put the work in and you don't realize it. I'm with you 1 hour a week. There's 168 hours out there that I'm not with you. And you're the one that has to put the work in and put the tools in. I call them check-ins, really, where we're able to just talk about what you need to check in with and make sure you're on the right path. And the other thing you brought up is 100% correct. And we've said it earlier in the podcast. You got to find the counselor that works for you and clicks for you, because I'm not for everybody. You could tell somebody to come see me. Doesn't mean I'm going to work for them. My approach is different. And somebody might need a little bit more coddling or need somebody that specifically focuses on, say, post-traumatic syndrome or something like that I don't do. And that's okay, because you're going to go to a different cardiologist. You're going to go to a different eye doctor. The relationship that we develop is 100% therapeutic. And it's the reason we do what we do.
You were just talking and I was just thinking of you as like my mental Sherpa. Like I'm climbing this mountain and you're there and you're like, okay, which path do you want to choose? I'm here with you. We'll explore this path together. It's nice to have that person that knows the mountain that you have to travel up. And if you find the right Sherpa, you're going to be in very good hands. So,
but that's what life coaching is. And that's what counseling and therapy should be. And whether it's for the relationship or whether it's personal, you come in, you figure out what path you need to take and you take it. And if you need to come back and ask for guidance again, then that's what you do. But you're out there doing the hike yourself. You're the one climbing the mountain.
yep.
I'm not the one that puts you on my shoulders and carries you up and say, "Hey, how's the ride?"
Well, you also don't say, well, if you don't want to take this journey, this is your decision. I'm here if you need me. If you want to go this way, we'll talk about it. If not, you probably either find another mountain to climb or come back when you're ready. I don't ever feel like you've ever forced me to talk or say anything that I haven't wanted to discuss. Again, your mantra is generally, this is your hour. Talk about what you want.
Great analogy. So I appreciate it, Ray. Thanks. I want to get a little bit more personal before we wrap up. And I'm hoping I can ask you a few questions. And just before you came and saw me, you talked about earlier in the podcast that you couldn't get your arms around a lot of things that were going on. What were some of the things that you tried before counseling?
In relation to what aspect are you referring to? Because I tried many things. I tried what I would sit down and think about things, what I did, how I could do it better. But again, it was only my perspective. So I don't like, again, asking for help. So I didn't really reach out. I would talk to friends. I would talk to my wife and tell them what I was thinking about. And they're both very good listeners and they're receptive, but I think sometimes they don't want to tell you necessarily, at least the people I talk to aren't telling me that, hey, this is wrong. They're like, well, this has always generally worked. You'll figure it out kind of thing, because you always have in the past. You don't want to tell somebody that asks you something, well, that's not the way I would do it, because that just makes them feel worse. And fortunately, my friends and family are very good that way. But also, I won't say I was left to my own devices, because that's not true at all. I just know that, again, I got stuck in a pattern. I never needed help before. I was unwilling to think that a stranger would be able to help me, if my friends and family, and if I couldn't help myself, mostly myself, because I suffered from just burnout, nothing had changed. Everything was still the same. And I didn't understand why I was feeling that way. I just was overwhelmed and exhausted, and being mentally exhausted, it is a real thing. I don't know how you can tell somebody who hasn't experienced it that I know we're all tired and we all have days, and when it just sounds like, oh, you suck it up. That's just the way life is. And that's the way that I was always conditioned. But I'm here to tell you, life doesn't need to be this way, and life shouldn't be this way, because that's not living, brother. Just constantly having your mind thinking about the 10,000 things you have to do while you're doing 6 at the same time, and you're not happy with the job that you're performing on any 6 because you can't focus and you're worried about what's happening, rinse, wash, and repeat, and then it's the next day and you still haven't got the things done from the day before, and now you're worried about the next day, and it just got to be too much for me. I couldn't compartmentalize anymore, and trying to figure out a way to say, okay, this is enough, this is good, and slow down, because you're making yourself sick. It's just not worth it. So you kind of gave me that. And thank you for that.
I appreciate that, and my pleasure. And you brought up a great point is a lot of people before they come to counseling talk to friends, they talk to family. And the biggest problem that I hear, and we all know this, is that they're opinionated. And I don't have an opinion of what path you take, whether it's the left one or the right one as your Sherpa, as you say. Your wife or family might steer you towards the left path, and your friends are going to steer you towards the right path. And or I'm going to say right, not the correct one, but just the one that's on the right side and one on the left side. And it's that. And if you go sit at the bar and talk to the stranger, and he's going to give you his opinion, where a good therapist shouldn't be giving you advice. They shouldn't be giving you an opinion. They should be, like I said, listening. And you described it perfectly as you come in and sound off and we talk about different things and different, have you thought about this perspective? I'm not telling you to go that perspective. I'm just saying, here's another opportunity. What you choose to do with it is completely up to you.
Yeah. And it's nice not being told, well, yeah, the way you're doing it is just wrong, because then it just makes you feel bad or makes you feel like you're inadequate. And that's not something that you've ever done. And I've been fortunate. People don't tell me, hey, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. But you're right. They have what they would do. And just because they would do something and that might not be for you, that might just create more discomfort because you ask somebody that you care about their opinion and they go about it a way that you don't find comfortable. You need to find something that works best for you. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Their lens that they look through is going to be different than your lens that they, so it's they're creating their opinion or telling you what to do based off of their experience in their life and their lens that they look through. And you just hit the nail on the head. It's not always going to be what works for you. And that's where therapy is fantastic for people like you and I, is that it's non-judgmental. We talk through things and we figure out what's going to be the best path for you to take. And as a counselor, people ask me all the time, they say, well, what if they choose the path that you don't agree with? I don't agree with anything. If they want to choose that path, then we go down that path. It's no different than when I work with couples and some say, well, they should get divorced. And I say, why? It's not my marriage. If they want to choose divorce, then we work on that. If they want to choose together, that's what we work on. And it's for a counselor to come in, and I hear so many people come in all the time, couple-wise, Ray, that, we saw 3 other counselors and they all told us to get divorced. And I say, is that what you want to do? And they say, no. And I say, okay, well, then work down the path that you want to work down. And that's the sign of a good counselor. And I'm not touting myself or pouting myself on the back. It's just, those are facts.
Well, and one of the phrases that you imparted on me was, you can choose the way you live or you can change the way you live. And that is, again, it just makes such sense. But if you're not happy and you choose to stay unhappy, that's your prerogative. If you want to change your way you're feeling or you want to change how you're living, then you change it. Choose it or change it.
I mean, and that's 100%. I mean, I say that to you and I say it to everybody. If you're choosing to stay, then you're choosing that path. But if you want to change it, then you're choosing change. I mean, so I think the old saying is, if you're not choosing to change, then you're choosing this. But if you're choosing to change, then you're choosing to put the work in and do, something like that. But you're absolutely right. And we talk about that all the time. And I talk about that with all my clients. If you're choosing to accept your wife cheating on you all the time, I'm not saying it's you, I'm just in general, then you're choosing that behavior and you're allowing it and you're accepting it. But until you make that change, then that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah, I don't necessarily, I mean, that can be with every aspect of life. It doesn't even necessarily mean what marriage. It can mean like if you're not happy with your job, change it. If you're not happy that the fact that you're not sleeping at night because you're constantly worried about the 10,000 things you got to do the next day, change it. Figure something out so you can sleep at night. That's part of was my mental stress, was the fact that I couldn't put my brain to rest. I have a friend that calls it scumbag brain. And I was like, that's awesome. I'm stealing scumbag brain, because for whatever reason, you wake up in the middle of the night and you just lay there and think about, instead of refreshing your brain and refreshing your body, you're thinking about the 10 million things that you have to do in the next couple days. And I am completely guilty of that, not being able to put my brain to rest. And it's exhausting, man. Exhausting.
No, it absolutely is. And using those tools to hopefully calm that brain and focus. And Kevin O'Leary talks about when he worked with Steve Jobs and focusing on the 3 tasks that you want to hit for the day and dialing into that frequency, and everything else is noise. And he's absolutely right. As an individual, it's in life, focusing on those 3 things that we need to get done, and everything else is going to pull us in all these other directions. And are we going to allow it to pull us in those directions, or are we still going to continue to focus on what's important? So yeah, it's learning how to shut that brain down at night and getting the sleep and the rest that we need. Let me ask you, if you compare yourself to day one when you came in to see me to where you are today, what do you think are some of the biggest differences that counseling has helped you with?
I think you filled my toolbox with tools that I can use when I get in a situation that previously would make me uncomfortable, or I would be stuck in a rut and again, trying to use a flathead when I needed a Phillips or vice versa. I have options now available to me. And to me, that's just the biggest gratification. I also tend to think that I get really down on myself when I can't figure things out. That's something that I had an issue with before. And now I realize that answers don't always just present themselves. Sometimes you have to work to get them. And it doesn't mean I'm less better than somebody else or I'm not capable of doing something. I just have to realize that I'm human and I'm not perfect, and nothing is so important to get myself so worked up and agitated about because I can't figure something out. That's being hard on myself. I'm learning to be a lot more forgiving of myself. That's, I think, what you've really helped me with. I would let something that I struggled with during the day affect me all day. And it didn't necessarily mean I took it out on other people. It just meant I took it out on myself. And that was just a miserable feeling.
No, it sounds like the most important thing you learned through this process is just processing. And
Yes, 100%. Agreed. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no,
that's precise, and that would be the word. That would be the word. I've learned to process and take the time instead of getting myself worked up over something that doesn't mean anything and allowing it to affect my mental health. Because it happens, you get down on yourself. Maybe not to the point where, it was never like a depression thing. It was just more of I would get agitated and angry that I couldn't figure something out. And again, not taking it out on anybody but myself. And it's a lousy feeling being mad at yourself because you don't have tools available. And now I have those tools. And to me, I have a lot less stress and anxiety in my life, anxiety especially. And I'm grateful for that. I still have moments. I can just handle them much, much better.
And it may never go away, but like you said, you have the tools now to process something that may have been a 10 is now a 4. And life is going to come up. Everything is going to happen. And something that may pop up today where a year ago would have spiraled. Today you go, I have the tools and I know how to fix this. It's still broke, but I still know how to go after it. It's not going to be a life-ending, altering situation where it may have been a year ago. So it's just, like you said, using those tools.
Well, I will say too, again, I don't know. You gave me a book to read. And again, it was called The Selfless Art of Not Giving an F. And I told you that's my problem. I give an F about everything. And when you care about everything and you're like, well, you've got to stop caring about the things that aren't worth caring about, the things that climbing this mountain, I don't need a microwave oven. Why do I have it packed in my backpack? And I got to set that down because that isn't what I need to focus on. The important things. I was focusing on everything and it just got to be exhausting. And I said to you, well, how do I know what to care about and what not to care about? And you're like, you'll know when you know, because that's the whole thing. And now I do know, and it's made a huge difference.
So you can honestly say you feel better walking out of our sessions than when you walk in?
100%. And even 100%. And even when there's been a couple times I've walked out of the sessions and I've told you, I feel like I've got an upset stomach because we've talked about something uncomfortable. But I don't mind that because that also means it's leaving my system and it's also giving me something to work on, which I am there to do anyhow. I just don't go to your session so you can tell me I'm doing a great job and keep up the good work and go on my way. I want to keep working, and sometimes work is hard. So I know sometimes if I do leave uncomfortable, that means we worked. And that gives me things to think about. And that eventually will add another tool to my toolbox.
That's a great analogy and a great perspective on it. So let me ask you this, Ray, and some of the final thoughts before we wrap up is, if you had to do it all over again, would you still go to counseling?
Well, I still go to counseling. So yes. But would I do it all over again? Yes. And I hate to use the phrase, well, if I knew what I know now, I would have started earlier, because anytime something is successful for you, you always wish you would have started it earlier. But things happen for a reason, and I went at the time that I absolutely needed to go. So yes, I would do it all over again, of course.
Great. And if you were to say something to somebody who's in a similar spot that you were in prior to coming to see me, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with stress and you feel like you've exhausted all avenues, why not? Why not try it? Because, again, at the very least, you'll get it off your chest. At the most, you'll find answers that'll help you. And it's a game changer. If you have an opportunity to take advantage of something that will help you, you certainly would. Again, if you had a migraine headache and you had aspirin in your medicine cabinet, why wouldn't you take the medicine if you had the opportunity to, instead of just laying there with your head pounding?
No, it's great. We go see the doctors we're supposed to go see. And in business, we get business consultants to help our business. And if we want to better ourselves and get a better job, what do? We go get another education. We get a master's, we get a doctor's. So we're always bettering ourselves, but it's the mental stigma that we, like I said earlier, we as a society, we need to get over. So one final thought, Ray, I want to ask you is, if somebody is considering me for my services for counseling for couples or individual, what recommendation could you make to somebody that's looking to hire me or work with me?
I think first and foremost, you're honest, and that's huge. Like I said, you will call bullshit. You have a pretty good bullshit meter. You've called it on me a couple times, and then I sit back and I'll think about it, and I'm like, yeah, maybe the way I phrased it, or maybe I'm feeling sorry for myself, but I think the other great point for me is you're a good listener. I mean, and to me, that's huge. I mean, you don't just hear what I'm saying, you listen to what I'm saying, and then you offer me options to course correct, or not even necessarily that. You're like, well, if this is the path you want to take, go with God. I hope it works for you. And if it doesn't, I'm here and we'll explore another option. So yeah, those are the two. I mean, and those are huge. I mean, because that's what you want in just anybody in your life. You want somebody to listen to you when you talk, and you want somebody to be honest with you when you have something to say, or if they have something to say. You also have to be receptive to sometimes realizing you're not going to like what's being said. It's not personal. And again, it's just an option that is available to you to take. It's up to you if you choose to take it. Just don't be mad if you don't like it. You don't have to like it, but it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Great perspective, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Is there anything else we missed or anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I feel this was a pretty productive conversation. I just hope, again, the negative stigmatism that goes along with mental health, it doesn't mean you're crazy. I mean, everybody, it would be if you were the president on the 8th day, maybe on the 8th day, everybody goes sees somebody's and just talks, because that phrase confession is good for the soul. You're not necessarily confessing anything. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm dealing with this week. I'm having issues with this, and this. How can I, because this is going to come up again, because that's the way life works. How do I deal with a situation when it comes up again where it doesn't affect me like it does now? I don't see why anybody wouldn't want the opportunity to solve a problem that causes them grief.
As we said at the beginning of the podcast, the first step is admitting or accepting, and picking up that phone is going to be the hardest call that you ever make, but it is absolutely worth it. So Ray, I really appreciate you coming on today and having the heartfelt conversations that we had, talking about men's mental health and counseling in general and your experience through the process. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you for all the help that you've given me. So this was my pleasure.
No, I appreciate it. And for those that for the rest of you that are out there, if this is something that resonated with you, please hit the like button below. If this is something that you think other people need to hear, please hit that share button, and love to hear the comments. So please leave them below, or feel free to DM me or send us a private email if this is something that you think could benefit you personally or your relationship. You can find us online at askchrisk.com or askmetanoia.com. And again, I'm Chris Kourtakis. I am a licensed counselor, life coach, and work with power couples and high achieving individuals to find the best version of themselves. So again, appreciate you guys tuning in today, and we'll see you on the next podcast.